Okay. Thank you, Minister Moses and your staff for attending a public meeting from social development. I'd like to welcome Minister Moses and his officials are here today for the NWT Housing Corporation to offer us a briefing on senior planning study. We will go to the minister and his staff for opening comments and their presentation. Then committee members will have the opportunity to ask questions. Before we do that, I'll ask Ms. Green to open up with a prayer.
We meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our territory fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and the future and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Before we go, I'll ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting on my left with...
Good afternoon, Frederick Blake, MLA for Mackenzie Delta.
Kevin O'Reilly, Frame Lake. Julie Green, Yellowknife Centre. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Michael Nadley, MLA for Decho.
Okay, thank you. Shane Thompson, Hendy. On my left is Megan Welsh, our policy analyst, and on our right is Gail Bennett, who is our clerk, committee clerk. So at this point in time, I will turn the floor over to you, Minister Moses, and if you have any opening comments, and we'll go from there. And presentation from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to committee. I am pleased to be here today to have a discussion about seniors' housing needs, and as you all received a seniors planning study from the staff. With me today, I have Mr. Tom Williams, President and CEO of the NWT Housing Corporation. On my far left, on my immediate left, Mr. Revi Lau, Director of Policy and Planning, and also joining me today is my ministerial advisor, Ms. Rana Sherigan. Mr. Chair, we are all aware that the number of seniors in our territory is growing at an extraordinary pace. While the population of the Northwest Territories has grown by just 1% since 2004, the populations of persons 60 years of age and older has grown by 53%. This trend is expected to continue well into the foreseeable future, and we will need to continue to plan for how these changes will impact all of our systems. Some housing efforts taken by this government to support seniors, especially in their desire to age in place, include the construction of senior independent housing, 8 plexes in 5 communities, Aklavik, Fort Liard, Wati, Fort McPherson, and Fort Good Hope. A seniors aging in place retrofit program was introduced, which helps make seniors' homes more durable and energy efficient. The Northwest Territories Housing Corporation will soon be introducing new multi-generational home ownership units in communities that will have a main floor accessible bedroom designed specifically for families that will be supporting an elder in their home. These are innovative initiatives that are already making a difference. The Seniors Aging in Place retrofit program is now one of the most accessed programs that the Northwest Territories Housing Corporation offers. The magnitude of the issue, however, means that we need to continuously explore and examine other solutions. Mr. Chair, to further inform us, as well as other governments, private industry, non-government organizations, and other stakeholders and decision makers, I requested that the Northwest Territories Housing Corporation commission a senior planning study to examine options related to seniors' independent housing. This seniors planning study is an assessment on seniors housing in all communities in the Northwest Territories, including current and future needs. The report provides a detailed review of the current context of the seniors population, households, and housing market, as well as examining considerations over the next 10 years. Key findings from this report indicate that the majority of seniors aged 55 years or older own their own home. However, there are communities across the Northwest Territories where a higher proportion of seniors are in rented homes. One of the key findings of the study was that we can now plan around the formation of approximately 165 seniors households annually. The needs of this population are varied and will need to be addressed. Thankfully, we have this study to help us plan for the seniors' needs in each community. Further, this study will help guide the work being conducted as part of the community housing plans, as each community takes a more active role with housing. This seniors' information will be incorporated into the community housing plans, which will drive the infrastructure decisions of stakeholders. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. I do look forward to answering any questions that committee members may have. And next, we do have a short presentation from our President and CEO, Mr. Tom Williams. And if the committee is in agreement, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Williams for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Committee agree? Okay, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm pleased to be able to share with you the results of the senior planning study that was undertaken by the Housing Corporation through its consultant, Dillon Consulting. As we all know, the number of seniors in the NWT is projected to grow significantly in the coming years. This study will help to inform the Housing Corporation as to how we can best serve this growing demographic. The first slide is in this presentation, slide number 2. I will discuss some of the more significant findings of the seniors planning study. I will begin by discussing a bit about what we hope this study would accomplish, along with a brief discussion on selected recent Housing Corporation initiatives for seniors. I will then move into talking about the approach that was taken when conducting this study. Next, I'll go through some of the projected future demand regarding seniors in the NWT and look at some possible design options that have been identified. And finally, I'd like to highlight some potential opportunities for improving existing seniors' housing units and possible new construction options. Moving to slide number 3, objectives of the study. Mr. Chair, there were 3 key objectives when we undertook this study. Firstly, we wanted to have a detailed, in-depth scan of the current state of seniors' housing in the NWT. Secondly, we wanted to identify specific areas and communities where the highest level of growth in the senior population is expected. Finally, we wanted to identify some of the most appropriate housing types and most desired amenities for seniors. Slide 4, recent initiatives. The Housing Corporation runs a number of different programs and initiatives that are designed to assist seniors in a variety of ways. Recently, there has been multiple seniors independent housing complexes constructed with the aim of helping seniors to stay in their home communities as long as possible. Additionally, the Housing Corporation also offers senior aging in place retrofits, which seniors can have their existing homes modified to help them more easily age in place. Slide number 5, the approach. Mr. Chair, the approach used for this study was 2-phased. Phase 1 involved a detailed review of the current conditions in Hay River and Yellowknife. This phase also included focus groups in both of those communities, where we were able to hear firsthand about specific challenges and opportunities in Hay River and Yellowknife. Phase 2 cast a wider net and looked at projected senior population growth in all of NWT communities, while also identifying design and configuration options for seniors housing. Moving on to slide number 6. Future demand. As you can see, we are anticipating a significant increase in the seniors population in the NWT by 2028. We're projecting a 71% increase in the number of seniors across the NWT by 2028. Also, every region is projected to have more seniors, from 38.3% increase in the Sawtooth to 110% increase in the North Slave. Slide number 7. This is some of the graphics that were in the report there. Here you can see the year-by-year breakdown of increases I noted in the previous slide. Slide number 8. Mr. Chair, we have picked out seniors population growth rates from selected communities across the NWT. You'll see significant projected increases in communities in every region in the NWT. Notably, although the North Slave will have the highest percentage increase as a region, the Katchadichi First Nation will have the greatest increase by community. And one I just wanted to point out, because this was a surprise to me as well, Norman Wells, I didn't know, I thought it was a transient population, but they have a huge seniors population in Norman Wells. That was a surprise to us. Okay, as on the next slide, slide number 9, as you can see from this slide, every region in NWT is projecting an increase in seniors households. By year 2028, there'll be more than 7,500 senior households total in the NWT. Slide number 10, design. Mr. Chair, this study found a number of different options that can be considered when designing or modifying a unit to more effectively serve the needs of a senior. While not all of these considerations may be appropriate for every unit, all of them would be helpful options for seniors aging in place. All of these considerations identified through the cross-jurisdictional and best practice research. These features were also raised during the focus groups in Hay River and Yellowknife. These features are all important to the growing seniors population in our territory. Slide number 11. Whereas the previous slide focused mainly on amenities and importance to seniors, we also have identified housing models that are preferable for seniors. This study has determined that the Housing Corporation has a number of possible options that can be most effective for seniors. There's really no one-size-fits-all approach, but through some combination of these and other housing types, there should be effective housing solutions for the majority of seniors. None of these models are perfect. Benefits and limitations of all of these types, these styles are discussed in the study. Slide number 12, opportunities. Mr. Chair, we talked about emerging demographic trends in the NWT. We have talked about the recommended design, amenities, and styles. And now I'd like to speak to some of the opportunities we have to grow housing for seniors across the Northwest Territories. As I have spoken to this committee about in the past, the new National Housing Strategy and the National Housing Co-Investment Fund may provide opportunities for new seniors-focused developments in Hay River and Yellowknife. The Housing Corporation's new home program is set to provide new multi-generational homes to families in non-market communities. As previously discussed, the Housing Corporation will continue with its seniors aging in place retrofits with the goal of keeping seniors in their own homes as long as possible. The corporation is currently undertaking community housing plans, which will lead to community-driven, locally appropriate housing outcomes for all communities. We expect that these plans will include important considerations for seniors. The Canada Housing Benefit is being co-designed by the Government of Canada and the Government of the Northwest Territories based on inputs from stakeholders from across the NWT. Although the final design process is not yet complete, we anticipate that seniors will benefit from the Canada Housing Benefit. And the final slide, Mr. Chair, I know we all value the seniors in our communities, and soon our communities will even have more seniors. With this comes certain challenges. However, through innovative partnerships and diligent work, we can make the most of the opportunities the study has identified and create better housing outcomes for our seniors. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for this opportunity to speak to you today, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Committee? Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for the presentation. I obviously just received this study, and so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But does it estimate the cost of meeting the needs of all the seniors who are identified in the projected populations? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Williams.
He does.
Oh, Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, there are no costing elements to the seniors planning study.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Ms. Green.
Thank you for that response. Is it the Housing Corporation's intention to create a cost estimate to fill all of these needs? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously we want to really focus on addressing housing needs right across all demographics across the Northwest Territories. Specific to this one, as you mentioned, as you can see on slide 12, some of the initiatives that we are taking in place, for one, the seniors aging in place retrofits has been really being utilized over the last couple of years. And I think when we work on our community housing plans, that we'll start to see more significance in seeing where the priorities fit for each community, whether it's seniors, homelessness, transitional units. We'll work with our leadership, and obviously we want to make sure that we get the right information and where the focus is from community leaders, community membership, as we start to invest in the communities. And I think those community housing plans are going to be play a big, significant role in that.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Green. Minister Moses, sorry. Ms. Green.
Thank you. So what I hear is there won't be an estimate, and that seniors will have to compete with other elements of the population to have their housing needs met. Is that correct?
Thank you, Ms. Green. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you see in the study, we have identified some communities that we're going to be taken as a priority that have really increased in senior population. As you heard Mr. Williams say in the presentation, Norman Wells was a surprise. We didn't expect to have a high senior population there. So we're going to be working with the communities to identify how we address seniors' needs across the Northwest Territories. You heard me say in the House, Mr. Chair, that I know here in Yellowknife and Hay River are going to probably be our two biggest communities that we're going to be working with to address this. And it's going to have to be a buy-in not only from us but also our stakeholders. We have met with the Senior Society. We have met with NWT Disabilities Council as well on how we work on dealing with accessibility. So we do have the stakeholders in place, but it's going to be, I think it's going to have to be a coordinated effort on how do we address this moving forward. But as I mentioned, Yellowknife, Hay River, and Norman Wells are probably going to be our communities that we need to look at first. A little further detail and information, Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to ask Mr. Williams to go into a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, and the minister's correct. Like this future investment, we know we have to come up with a plan. Right now, we have aging infrastructure in Hay River and Yellowknife. We have the Woodland Manor here that needs a replacement. We have been putting money aside for that future replacement in our budget. Also, Riverview Complex in Hay River, the seniors complex there is due for a replacement in the near future. So we will be targeting those investments for sure. We sit on a working group with Avens. They're looking at a development here in Yellowknife where the greatest demand is. So we've been working in partnership with them, and CMHC will be submitting they're submitting a seed proposal to get funding to flesh out their do some a strategic plan moving forward for their development and to flesh out their proposal. With Hay River, we had in the meeting there, we had a follow-up to our earlier meeting with the residents of Hay River, and it was mentioned there that there's a lot of interest there in Hay River to do a development. A lot of private investors want to get involved, and the perfect tool is the co-investment fund. So we'll be working closely with all partners that want to invest in seniors, and we do have money put aside, we don't have it fully costed out, but certainly for these bigger projects, we had to earmark some money for both Yellowknife and Hay River. And as the minister alluded to, as we complete these community housing plans, it's going to reaffirm and have a community say on what type of delivery they want for seniors in their community. It might be a fourplex, it might be a different type, different configuration for seniors. So we're looking forward to it, and I think that's one of the benefits, I think, is that it's going to be, a lot of it's going to be community driven on what the initial projects look like and as we complete those projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister Williams. Minister Moses. Minister Moses?
Just really quickly, and in my opening remarks, we did say the investments that we had in the 5 communities with the 8 plexes. One thing that I think this senior planning study is going to offer us is to see where we need to put our investments and priorities. And you've seen it in the presentation that there are communities that do need investment, and if anything, the senior study is going to give us that option tied in with the community housing plan. So I think as we get this information out to our leadership and our membership and our partners and stakeholders, that we will be able to work together to address senior housing needs across the territory.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Ms. Green, short clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Williams said there was money set aside to replace Woodland Manor. Did you mean Mary Murphy?
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Mary Murphy.
Okay. thank
Woodland
you.
Manor's the one in Hay River.
Yeah,
I mixed them up, sorry about that.
no problem.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the independent housing complexes, I know we have one in Aklavik and soon in Fort McPherson. I'm hoping that, I don't think it meets the demand, because as you can see, our numbers are almost going to double here in the next few years. And I know a lot of people, elders especially, want to stay in the community. They don't want to be shipped off to Nuvik or Yellowknife. But it just depends on the needs that they have. But I know every one of the elders in my riding want to stay in the community, and it's very important that we also have training in place. I know in those facilities we have equipment there that's needed to keep the elders, just meet all their needs. That's one of the important things that came up in one of my minister's tours, and that's what people want to see, is all the proper training to operate those independent living facilities that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Minister Moses.
Thank you, and this is something I'll be having to work with with other departments such as Health and Social Services and our Indigenous governments. As IRC got some funding to do some training for long-term care staff. And as you noted, and in my opening comments, the population persons of people that are going to be over 60 years has increased by 53% since 2004. And we need to start addressing how we work on keeping our seniors in their own homes. And that's through some of the programs that I mentioned that are identified on slide 12. But take the members' comments, and it's something that we're working on addressing. And like I said, it's just not us. We need to be working with other departments, but also other stakeholders such as the NWT Senior Society, NWT Disabilities Council, and our leadership in our communities.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Blake.
Thank you. The other thing about aging in place retrofits, how soon can the elders access this funding? Because I know a number of elders in their 70s, 80s, 90s that need some work done to their homes, whether it's putting rails up or making it more accessible, maybe a wheelchair ramp. We seem to have more elders with diabetes now that, some are almost in wheelchairs, or we have some that are. And the other thing was the home heating subsidy has actually gone down a bit. actually went from leaders into the dollar amounts, which is a lot, it's almost 500 to 1,000 liters less, so, that's something that we need to look at as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And accessing any type of our programs for funding, we're making sure that our district offices get out and share that information with our residents. As you've heard me say in the House, that we're looking at creating initially it was an Indigenous Housing Summit. We're looking at changing it to a Northern Housing Summit where we can invite our sister territories to come and participate, Nunavut and then Yukon. And actually during that summit, we'll be sharing all of the information and all the programs that we provide through the NWT Housing Corporation and sharing best practices as well as success stories. We will be looking at inviting NWT Senior Society as well as the NWT Disabilities Council and some of our Indigenous governments to share what they've been doing to address this. On the senior home heating subsidy side, that's a program through the Department of EC&E, and I know they do have 3 zones when you access that program, and we can make sure that that's something that we look at sharing as well during the summit. I'll go to our President CEO for a little bit more information. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, seniors aging in place, that program, we've seen a huge intake. When I think we did a strategic program renewal, and one of the big policy changes we made was removing the copay and changing the limits on a copay, because that was a barrier for a lot of times seniors with a fixed income. They couldn't access that repair program, and because they couldn't afford to pay the copay. So we made that change, and since that change has been made, I think it's any household under the income of $60,000, there's no copay. So with that, we had a huge intake in the last couple of years on more seniors accessing the program, which is a good thing. That's what we wanted to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Blake.
I know I'll give other people a chance here.
Oh, okay.
If we have time, I'll come back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wish I would have had this before the meeting. This is, I sort of thought this was going to be some survey results. This is a lot more extensive than I thought it was going to be. And I think it's a very good snapshot of the inventory that we have of housing, its condition, the number of seniors in each of the communities. This is really helpful information, I think, for the development of these community housing plans. So hats off to you guys for doing this. I guess I think I heard a couple of different things about whether there's going to be a costing of the needs identified in here. I think you're going to have to do that, but I think what's going to be even more important is to develop a tracking system, because some of these gaps are going to get filled from different kinds of programs over time, and you're going to need to have a really good tracking system to enable somebody at any moment to understand what the current needs are and how you can fill those gaps. So do you folks, what kind of tracking system are you thinking of, or have you turned your mind to that yet? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think that's a great idea. Any kind of programs that we're developing, I think we need to monitor and evaluate on a annual basis. I'm not sure if we have anything in place right now. I don't think we do, but really take the member's point in place. I think as I mentioned, oh, bless you. As I mentioned in the previously, this planning study is going to help us identify where we need to put the investments. I think the community housing plans, as members have alluded to, is going to also help us address all types of priorities in our communities. I know seniors are probably going to be big on that list, but appreciate the members' comments, and we will be definitely working on something.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think the next, there's a bunch of different things, I guess, that spring from this. One is the development of those community housing plans, so that
communities can have a better understanding of where they're at, what the preferences may be in terms of housing design and some of the options that you guys have outlined in here. You guys got to find the money to do this. You need the cost estimates and try to match that up with different kinds of programs. You know, there's some things under the National Housing Strategy that might be able to access, but we may need to just start spending more money on housing as a government, and I've always encouraged that. So, and then, you know, working with folks like the NWT Senior Society and so on, getting their feedback as we move forward. But so I'm thinking like the next step, you got to develop the monitoring evaluation framework, the tracking system, and part of that's going to be the costing and figure out how these community housing plans are going to work together to and feed into that work as well. So is it the intention of the department, or sorry, the corporation to come back at some point with some ideas about what the next steps are? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and as you heard in some of my answering some of the questions yesterday, we are developing a 3-year action plan. With this one, we're also going to be, as the community housing plans do unfold throughout all of our communities across the Northwest Territories, I think it's going to show us where we need to invest our dollars. The co-investment fund, I think that was a really great news story. That is an national application-based program where we were able to access that $60 million specifically just for us and how we need to spend that money. The Indigenous Housing Fund, we're still continuing to work with the federal government on seeing if we can get any of those dollars rolled out to our communities. I think I'd have to say the next step is not only the community housing plans, but that housing summit that we're going to do, that we're going to invite all of the communities and leadership to attend the summit and have our partners and stakeholders do a presentation is going to be big, and letting them know what our programs are to NWT Housing Corporation, as well as what other programs out there, such as the seed funding through CMHC. So I think that's going to be the next big step. I mean, after the session's done, we're going to be putting a lot of focus, and we've already started that focus on this housing summit. And we'd also invite a committee to attend that summit and see what'll come out of that.
Thank you, Minister Moses.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll ask Mr. Williams to add to that.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
I agree with the member that monitoring and evaluation is key. We have to have that in place, and any new programs we deliver, we always ensure that we have that. Coming up with the costing, any new, as we develop the plan and see where the needs are, we know for sure there's a need in Yellowknife and Hay River. We know that that's a given. So there has been some progress there, and a lot of these, as we move forward, it's going to be this information that we got from the planning study, where the demand is, the information that we get through community housing plans. It's going to inform our capital plan, and that's where you'll see the costing for future seniors housing allocation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Natalie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to commend the minister and his department for undertaking such a very, very impressive report. I'd like to say that's a positive beginning in terms of ensuring that we make efforts to address the needs of our elderly population, especially when it's been stated time and time again by this government that yes, indeed, we have an aging sector of our population that is going to demand specialized infrastructure and public services, and so I acknowledge that. One of the things that I want to understand in terms of housing, how it's approached in terms of delivering programs and housing needs here in the NWT is that I need to be reassured that we still hold dearly the principle that our elders are valued and they have a role, a continued role in our families, and I'd like to get that acknowledgement from the minister that yes, that's still a valid cultural value here in the NWT, and that should continue. At the same time, it should also reflect in terms of the program and services that we deliver and infrastructure. There could be perhaps some ideas for innovation in terms of the design of future buildings that reflects based on community housing needs, based on perhaps some innovative housing designs that could come about. So I just wanted to, as more or less a commentary, but if the minister feels strongly to maybe reassure me in terms of the value principle of elders and our seniors, I appreciate it. We'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Natalie. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yes, of course, something that I think we've all grown up in the Northwest Territories, respecting our elders. I think this study proves that we are working on finding ways that we can address on the housing side needs, but also working with our partners to address the overall care of our elders throughout the NWT. Also, our investments in the 5 communities with the 8plexes, I think, shows that we're focusing on that. And not only that, but I'm going to go back to the Northern Housing Summit that we're working on. We are looking to invite the NWT Senior Society to come and do a presentation and listen and hear what the concerns are from our Indigenous leaders. But we've also looked at and had a meeting with the NWT Disabilities Council so that as we build new homes, that we're able to make them accommodate the accessibility of housing units for our seniors and putting that into our stock for the senior population. And more importantly, I said it's going to take all of us to work on this, and that Northern Housing Summit is going to have our leaders from the communities that'll give us input into where we move forward. And I'll go through you, Mr. Chair, I'll go through to our Mr. Williams for further information.
Okay, thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, and the member mentioned taking, we respect elders. I'm an elder now too, so a young elder. But design considerations, it's huge. Like, we have to listen. We have to reach out. We reach out to the NWT Senior Society. We meet with them on a regular basis. Avens, we're on a working group with Avens for the development here in Yellowknife. We have to listen to what works. What do seniors need to be so they could age in place? So we're open to all considerations from the different senior groups, from Indigenous governments, from the general public. We want to make sure we do it right. As an upcoming senior, I hope it's done, and I want to make sure it's done right. So it's, design considerations is key. And as the minister said, we're meeting with all our partners, meeting with the NWT Council of Disabilities. Accessibility of units is key. We want to, right now, private industry doesn't build accessible units. It costs too much. So we're the government. We have to make sure we deliver that on our designs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Natalie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the minister in terms of making me understand just how it is that we value our elders. The other question that I have is how significant are housing plans, the need for them to be developed at the community level in partnership, of course, with the Housing Corporation and this government. And how does it play in terms of engaging communities, and what would be the expected outcome of these housing plans at the community level? I understand, even I think with some recent discussions with the minister, there are still housing needs in terms of having available services and maintenance for people that live in communities, and especially elders too as well down the road, and whether housing plans would become perhaps a reflection of how the needs of elders could be identified, and how that's going to play in the general scheme of things with community perspective and plus with the Housing Corporation. Let's see.
Thank you, Ms. Natalie. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've heard me in my minister's statement last week talk about the community housing plans. We have 6 communities that we're working with currently. We've signed agreements with 3 of them. We're continuing to work with the other 3 to sign the agreements. And one thing that I said about those community housing plans is it's not us telling the communities what they need. It's the community membership, leadership, and the expertise of that community telling us where we need to be investing our dollars and investing where we need to be investing that meets the needs of that community. Whether it's seniors in certain communities, it could be seniors in one community, it could be homelessness, but we need to listen to the people and work with them to address those needs. And I do believe that at the housing summit that we're going to be working on, we're going to be giving an update and hopefully have some of our communities that are working on those housing plans and have agreements, just give a little update on what they've been doing so that communities that don't have a housing plan right now can get started and start thinking about how do we move forward. How do they move forward in working with us?
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Natalie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, should we expect, we have 33 communities in the north, 33 community housing plans?
Thank you, Mr. Natalie. Minister Moses.
Yeah, that's the plan, is that every community has their own community housing plan. Obviously, each community is unique. We do have 6 communities also along the Mackenzie River that are in flood zones, so we're also working with the Department of MACA when we look at those. We look at the coastal communities and coastal erosions, so it's not only community housing plans, it's that they also got to be in partnership with community plans themselves for the communities. But yes, that's the end goal, is have 33 community housing plans for all of our communities across the Northwest Territories. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'd maybe go to our President, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, the minister's right. These community housing plans, it's going to be a community-driven process. At the end of the day, it's going to inform future investments in the community. I've been to every community in the NWT. Every community has a different housing need and different ways to deal with it. And that's what I learned quickly. So I think having the community to tell us what the need is, then it's our job to make sure we put it into our investment plans, into our capital plan to meet those needs. There will be these community. Our goal is 33 plans, but there will be. We've been asked by some leaders they want a regional plan. Like, for example, the Cleat Show said, "Can you roll up our community plans into a regional plan?" Yes, we're willing to do that. So there might be some regional focus as well. I think the IRC or in the Nuvie-Alouette want to do the same, do a regional plan. So we are open to that because I think it makes sense. It just shows it's more like I think having the individual plans are key, but we could actually roll them up, and eventually we could roll it up to a territorial plan. Here's where our investment's going. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So I guess my first question I have, when we talk about, Hay River and Yellowknife being the focus, but when we look at slide 8 here, Hay River is actually 6 spots below when we look at the expectations, 2028. So why is Hay River up there ahead of, Tuck, Fort Simpson, Norman Wells, Catadichley? Like these ones here, I'm looking at your guys' number and your projections. Why aren't they being addressed before Hay River? Minister Moses.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you look at where the senior population currently is and the demand. The demand is actually here in Yellowknife and Hay River currently in terms of housing needs. You look at the waiting lists for public housing, but also you look at the market rental units in both here in Yellowknife as well as Hay River, and there is a need. As you've heard our president mention, that when you go to the communities, Hay River, for example, has, I don't even know if they have places to rent and market rent or even public housing. And same here with Yellowknife, the need, and that's where we're putting our focus right now. And so it's just reality of what's happening currently. In the future, as you said, 2028, we'll continue to work with our federal counterparts to try to secure more funding to address the needs as we move forward. And through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll ask our President to speak a little bit more to this.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, really, Yellowknife and Hay River are being identified because sheer population. It's the greater demand. And the fact that we have been investing as a government outside of Yellowknife for many years with the seniors complex that we have built. We are currently renovating a seniors place in Fort Providence. That'll be on stream this summer. We'll have Fort Good Hope and Fort McPherson will be opening this summer as well. These are 9 plexes. So we upgraded the Joe Greenland Center, new facility there. So we have made significant investments for seniors outside of Yellowknife and Hay River, and I think we just have to catch up to the demand. So that's where we're at now, and I think we have to look. Maybe it comes out, and when we do these community housing plan, there's we haven't met with Norman Wells yet to do a community housing plan, and we could validate that there is a huge seniors population there. Maybe they do need a seniors complex there, and so it's all taken into consideration when we do our capital planning process. But at the same time, the minister alluded to earlier, is this co-investment fund will allow for private entrepreneurs, private business to get involved, or indigenous development corporations to be part of the housing solution. Because to have a pot of money of $60 million over 9 years and getting 75 cent dollars from the feds, it's very attractive for investment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I understand, but I mean, realistically, if you look at prorated, these concerns are, I'm looking at these communities here, there's a demand. And we're going to focus on the big centers and the small. So what's going to happen is we're going to see people move from these smaller communities to where these facilities are going to be. So that's going to be a challenge. My other question, though, Gims, is fourplexes. Have you looked at that for small communities? Because I know Mr. Blake talked about, talking to his elders. Elders in the smaller communities have been very clear. They do not want to move to Simpson, even worst case to Yellowknife or Hay River. They want to stay in their own community. So will you look at that? Because I know in all the 4 small communities that I'm looking at, one of the questions they ask, are we willing to build a fourplex for elders to live in there? And I understand we can't go stage 3 or 4, but 1 and 2. So is that something that you guys will be looking at? I know you're talking about community plans, but they're asking about it now. And, depending on when the community plan's going to be done, it could be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So is that something that you guys are looking at? Thank you. Minister Moses?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And you do mention demand, and we do know there's a demand out there for housing, affordable, accessible housing throughout the Northwest Territories. We're trying to do our best to address those needs, whether it's seniors, whether it's homelessness, public housing. And in terms of the senior planning study, I think it gives us good direction moving forward. And I did mention the summit. I think we're going to have a really good discussion around this moving forward, and looking at a priority through the community plans. It's not that we're not doing anything, as you've heard in my opening comments. We have invested the 8 plexes into the 5 communities. I know people don't want to leave their communities, but even in reality, we do have individuals staying at over at the Avon Center from outside of the NWT. We'll work with them and continue to work with them as a strong partner to address this. And I think when we do have this summit, it's going to be a reality check for not only us as a government, but I think it's going to be a reality check for all our stakeholders, that where do we need to invest our dollars in our capital plans. The Indigenous funding, as I mentioned, we're continuing to work with the federal government to get that done. But you look at IRC, what they've done, and working with us on our capital plan to address the housing needs in the ISR. And if we can develop those kind of partnerships with our other Indigenous governments, we're going to be creating jobs, skill development, training, and addressing our housing needs in all the communities. So it's going to take all of us working together to get this done. And honestly, I think that summit, when we get to that summit, we're going to hear a lot of realities and what's happening in the communities.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Moses, just, you didn't answer my question about fourplexes. Yeah, but have you guys developed a logic model? Have you guys, because when you talk about evaluation, again, have you guys got a logic model in place so that, at the end of the day, that's what your outputs are and that's how you guys are going to engage the evaluation process? Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Okay, I'll answer the first question first on the fourplexes. Yes, certainly if they see a demand in the small communities across the territories, and we would look at that and incorporate it into our capital plan. A fourplex in a small community, I think we have one in Sikachik it was built a number of years ago. It's serving its purpose for seniors. It's dedicated for seniors, it's accessible for seniors, and we would look at other communities as well. We're not just going to concentrate on Yellowknife and Hay River, the bigger centers. Like, we have to provide the delivery throughout. And right now, we don't want to lose the opportunity of having this additional federal dollars available to help this solution. On the second question, we do have an evaluation framework on all our programs and services that we deliver, so there will be a logic model to follow and going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Just a couple of really short questions. There's been a couple of mentions of a Northern Housing Summit. What's the target time for that to be held?
Thank you, Ms. Green. Minister Moses.
Yeah, actually, I'm really excited about it. It's the first one that we've done. Since I've been in the role, we've been having a lot of meetings with Indigenous governments and our NGOs, and we're giving the same message to everyone. And we're not able to get out to all the communities. Although the district offices are doing a good job, it'd be great. I was talking to the staff and I said it'd be great to have everybody together, talk about the challenges, barriers, but also talk about some successes that we're seeing. And the staff's already working on it. We're drafting up an agenda. We're looking possibly in middle of May. Dates aren't confirmed, but we will be sending out we will send out an invitation to committee if they want to come up and listen. And I have mentioned that I would be up in Inuvik because the partnership that we have with the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation and the work that they've done with us, they were successful in securing some of that Indigenous funding and helping us out with our capital plan. And we just want to highlight the work that they've done in the community of Inuvik and the ISR region. So once everything's finalized, we will send out an invitation to committee to attend. It's very exciting. It's something new that the government NWT Housing Corporation has never done before, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Ms. Green.
Thank you for that response. When the anti-poverty roundtables are held in different communities, they go on tours of local initiatives so that they get a sense of what's happening in the community. They don't just sit in a hotel boardroom for 3 days. And that's, I've always found that very helpful, to go and see what's happening on the ground. So just a comment to that, I'm looking forward to it. My last question is, what is the plan to share this with the public? I think there'd be a lot of interest, even beyond people who are interested in housing, because there's so much good quantitative information. So what's the plan to share this with the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Minister Moses.
First of all, when we were up in Inuvik, one of the ideas is to go and showcase the sixplex that we worked with the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation. And in terms of sharing this with the public, obviously we want to get it out, but also get it out to our stakeholders that have very big interest into how do we address the seniors population and the demand that's been discussed here. But maybe I'll go to Ravi, Tom, in terms of our next steps in getting this out.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have developed a communications plan for the distribution and communication of the document. As the minister noted, it is certainly a very important component of the community housing plans themselves in terms of the complete environmental scan of the housing conditions in a community. So we'll be available on site on our website as well. I know that. Yes, and certainly some of our stakeholders are very much interested. Avens has approached us. I think that will go a long ways towards the development of their business planning in terms of any new infrastructure. We will have a new website ready to launch shortly that will be reflect the common look and feel of the rest of the government. And there's a plan to table this document later in this session.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for the information about how you're going to work with the stakeholders. I think it's so hot that it's burning in my hands. So there's lots of good stuff in here, and I know it's brand new, so I look forward to working with the partners to get the information out. One of the things that I hear commonly about seniors aging in place is that often there's some minor work that needs to be done on a house. Trying to find a contractor to do it, a small job, almost impossible. So have you guys thought about this, or is there a way to bundle the work together, or do we train people in small communities in particular to do this kind of work? What kind of options or ideas have you guys thought about in this regard? It's a great program, but trying to find a contractor, almost impossible. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Minister Moses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we do understand that's a big issue, especially in some of our smaller communities where we don't have the skilled workforce to do that type of work. One solution that we have been working on and developing is having our own local housing organization as well as our district office to go in and do that type of work, even for homeowners, which was never offered before because they can't find the contractors. So that's something that we have identified, and we are working to find solutions to address it. I'm not sure if Tom, yeah.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, certainly training people is key. You know, I sit on the co-chair of the Clecho Working Group. I'll give you an example. And one of the priorities of Clecho Working Group is to build capacity in the trades area. So we're going to, through that working group, we'll be working closely with ECE, working with the Clecho government to try and get a larger trade force that could serve the public and serve the communities better. So that's a high priority. There's a shortage of tradespeople across the territory. As the minister said, certainly where applicable, LHOs could deliver this work and provide that service. We also have our Community Housing Support Initiative program. It was a new program rolled out under the strategic renewal that allows community organizations to come forward. They could submit a proposal to provide that service in the community, where they could provide the trade opportunities, trade assistance to homeowners. So that's something that we have put out there to the leadership, and we're hoping to get some intake. There's some communities have actually expressed it. I think some from the Nahende region have expressed it. We also from other regions where they want to. There's a lack of trades, but if they could deliver it themselves and use their own capacity, we're open to that. And we would fund it through our Community Housing Support Initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Minister Moses.
And just really quickly, I think that's where the idea came up, to get all the leaders together and share this information in a one-stop shop with the summit. Is this community housing support initiative is something that they can access for all types of projects, but that's one that we just recently had actually with one of our community governments on how do we get people trained to in their own community to address those issues. So it's something that we are promoting every time we have a meeting with any of our Indigenous governments and community governments to address this, and it's something that we'll highlight at the summit as well.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Being respectful of the time, we can session starting real here quick. I'd like to thank the minister and the department and our public that showed up here and the public out there. I think it's very informative. Again, I have to thank the minister and the department for developing this plan, and, you know, probably more questions as we go through it and that, but at this point in time, I turn the floor to you, Minister Moses, for closing comments.
Yeah, just want to thank the committee for the questions and the discussion, the support. And once again, once the summit is set in stone, we will send an invitation to committee to come and attend and listen to what is going to be discussed around the table. I'd like to thank the staff for all their hard work in all areas of the housing portfolio, and continuing to look forward to working with you to address all of our housing needs. And like I said, some really good suggestions today. Appreciate it, and we've taken notes, and we'll continue to work forward. So, merci.
Thank you, Minister Moses. Committee will do a wrap-up on Monday. Okay, thank you.